This is Edtech People, a podcast where we get to meet those working in EdTech, exploring their journeys, roles and insights. You can catch up on our previous episodes at any time by searching for us wherever you get your podcasts or visiting our website at www.edtechpeople.co.uk. We're always on the lookout for guests, so if you're interested in coming on the podcast, please follow the link on our website and let us know. So joining me on this episode of EdTech People is Tim from Secure Schools. Tim, nice to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. So Tim, you're from Secure Schools, who's somebody that I've been working with for a little while now, and many people will have seen Secure Schools at events such as BET and other events where you've been quite heavily promoting yourselves. Your role there is operations director. What does that mean? What do you do?
So I deal with the day-to-day operations of Secure Schools. I sit and work very closely alongside our CEO, Paul Albury, and deal with the day-to-day ongoings and operations of Secure Schools. Work closely across all the teams within the company, and ensuring that there's a joined up approach across what we do as an organisation, and that feeds into the good work that we do for our customers, our schools.
Brilliant. And what does Secure Schools do in a nutshell? So obviously the name leads you to know it's something to do around cybersecurity, but what exactly are you all about there?
So we deliver cybersecurity solutions purely to education customers. So we want to fundamentally help our education system, our global education system, to remain safe, secure in a, ever increasing, ever expanding, ever risky digital world that we operate in. And Secure Schools offer platform solutions, but also services to those schools. So from our platform, we deliver phishing simulations. We will provide training resources. We also do policy generation. So some of the, people see these as more mundane, boring, administrative things, especially around the policy development, which is so crucial actually to the operations of those schools. It sets the foundations of what those schools are doing, and in line sets the expectations of the staff within. So we provide a platform that can do the heavy lifting at the click of a few buttons for those schools. And then on the other side of things, we have a service offering as well. So we will audit schools. We will provide vulnerability assessments internally and externally to those schools. We can do penetration testing. We can do cyber incident response planning sessions with schools as well. And end to end on those services, I like the audit side of what we do can provide massive benefit to our schools, because it provides them a strategic vision to where they are at the moment, but also provides them something to guide them along the path of what they need to do over the course of the academic year and beyond then. So we will have a number of interviews, a number of discussions with people across the school and its community, to gauge an understanding of where that school currently lies in terms of their cybersecurity posture. Something I feel that we do is quite unique as well with those audits is that we'll look into the culture within those schools as well. So not only are we looking at the the technical resource that the school has, the policies, the processes, the governance that that school has or that multi-academy trust has. We'll also look into the culture. So we'll conduct a number of cultural audit interviews with a selection of staff and other stakeholders across those schools to really get an understanding of how some of those technical controls, policies, process, governance fits in at a cultural level. Because things like training, if we're speaking to people and they're saying, "Oh yeah, I think I recall that we did training at some point," but we're having conversations with other school leaders, technical representation from there is like, "Oh yeah, we have a training plan." It's like, does this need to be improved? We can make recommendations that say, actually, yes, we can see that you've got a training plan in place, but actually your school staff aren't readily recalling this. Likewise, the schools might be have technical controls in place, like they're not permitting staff to use removable storage, but we have a conversation or one of those cultural conversations, and it's like, yeah, we know that this is the policy, but actually the PC round the corner we found it doesn't have the port blockers in, or we found it's not within the scope of their security controls, and we found that we can still use it. So we can report back on things such as that to give them a really good strategic way forward, and we can highlight what's a priority, like yeah, you're taking backups, but you're not actually testing them. That seems to be a favourite, or actually they are testing them, but they feel that the ad hoc file level restores that they're doing every now and again are robust enough to say, yeah, we are testing them. And we can report back in a constructive way that supports the fantastic work that the school IT team, support provider are doing, but also highlights some things that they can be doing better. So that's clearly an element of what we do that I'm quite passionate about. But yeah, right through to full technical testing, penetration testing, and to really get in amongst the weeds of the vulnerabilities that exist within our schools' networks.
It's so interesting, a lot of those areas, and we'll definitely dive into some of those bits that you've talked about there. And I think that around the auditing, for example, of what people believe is supposed to be happening and then what actually is happening is really, really interesting. I was on the podcast myself as a guest host, a guest even the other day for the NAHT talking about cybersecurity. And I'm going to steal some of the questions that they asked me to ask you as well from your point of view. It was really interesting being on the flip side and answering some of those questions. And it'd be interesting to see whether we align on what I said or whether I was talking a load of rubbish, either of which is completely. But looking at your history, just using LinkedIn just to have a look in it, I can see that you and I have travelled a very familiar path, working through from IT technician, senior IT technician, director of IT levels. In fact, even following a very similar path, working for Catholic multi academies as well, which is where I used to work.
Yeah.
So, following that pathway in, that obviously gives you a really unique viewpoint onto how schools work and on how the realities are on the ground, and also the possibilities of what's possible in an education setting. Because you mentioned that secure schools are education only. What is the difference between securing schools and securing businesses? Why is there a need to only be able to do one and not do the other at the same time? Is it purely because that's the customers that you want to be working with, or is there a different environment at play here?
Schools, the nuances within schools are I'd say vast in comparison um, to private sector, and also the variety of people that are within schools and education, public sector in general, is so different. So you often have like dedicated teams within private sector. You'll have security operations, you have infosec, you'll have people that are specifically there within the private sector organisation to facilitate those roles, and within schools. And I'm sure you'll agree with our past and how we operated as a very generalist
Yeah.
role. So whereas we both might have our, I guess, specialisms in what we could, would, or felt most comfortable with, our skill set was generally spread very thinly. So we would, on one hand, be managing our teams, managing the issues that people bring within that, and then in the next moment, we could be supporting a class teacher trying to get their class running in front of 30 kids
Yeah.
in a highly stressful situation for them, back to writing up operational processes, and then configuring a firewall. And the variety of what IT support staff within an education setting have to deal with, is huge. And the 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 focus within schools as well is always going to be about education. That's
Yeah.
going to be first and foremost in sort of everyone's mind within that school. Is like how can we create the best teaching and learning environment for our children? How can we ensure that our kids are coming in at one end of the school system and leaving with the best possible outcomes, and and I'm sure these are things that we'll go into later on. But I think that in itself causes a lot of problems or variance between what we find in schools when compared to private sector. So I don't think necessarily. What am I saying? I think the priorities are still there. The priorities are still equal when it comes down to the people that are implementing these controls, but the focus between the two is vastly different.
Absolutely. And if you read the NCSE guidance and training which schools should be delivering, as you well know, they make clear that one of the reasons why education is targeted so much is because we don't have those specialist teams in place within schools, and we do have those people who are trying to do everything and anything. I used to joke anything with a plug or a battery fell under IT, and as you say, one moment you can be doing some high level stuff, configuration. Next, it's planning, management, and then you could be doing the musical and making sure all the kids are mic'd up correctly. So when you're doing that, it doesn't mean that the criminals and the risks are dropped whilst you're out of that room doing those other things. It's a constant battle, isn't it, for these days to keep on top of the ever changing landscape, as you said. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's just a case of the different environments rather than from a technical point of view needing to put in different technical solutions. I think there's a lot of similarity on both sides of that. And within the schools, obviously, we know there's such a wide range of roles as well. And if you're working in an environment where you're constantly using IT in a business, there is an expectation that you have prior knowledge, and it's something that you want to use. Whereas in education, we're still in that. We're still. I'd probably say about 80% there, but there's still quite a lot of work to convince some people that IT has got some kind of role in the future. And certainly in the way that the IT is developing, more cloud based, more opportunities with AI and stuff, it's quite a challenge to get people out of where they used to just use IT, isn't it? Where compared to now using it in this new way and being so acutely aware that they're on the front line in a in cyber warfare almost. They're the people that are being targeted, those people who don't want to get involved in IT, or don't see it as a major plus point, as well as the people who are using it, at the front line, encountering new risks as well. I mean, AI in particular, we can see that, being at the forefront of what people are wanting to use. And I suppose the question is how many people are looking at the security implications of using that new technology.
How many people are ignoring the security implications of using that technology because they're scared of it, or they're overwhelmed by what they're seeing before them? And that's where it's important that we set the messaging. And I think there's a number of factors at play, specifically within education as well. When you were talking about the people that this impacts, my mind went in a sort of couple of directions here. You've got the operational impact of that, and then you've got the education side. From an ops point of view, IT and anything that goes with it is expensive.
Mm.
And generally in our education system, they don't have the money fundamentally to play with. So they're forced into making some very difficult strategic decisions. And the thing that doesn't always play into our favor is that those people sometimes making those decisions don't have the fundamental understanding or grounding in what's the implication if we don't do this. The other side of it is the impact of putting those cybersecurity or security measures in place, what that has on the classroom environment. We're frequently talking about multi-factor authentication, the part that has to play, but it's the thing within conversations that I have with our customers and other people at shows like BET is the one we always get the most pushback from, because how, as an IT leader in a school, one of the things that I want to put in place is better security on my accounts, and the way that I can do that is by implementing multi-factor or two-factor authentication. But there's a desire within our classrooms to reduce or remove the low-level disruption. So I also don't want my staff having 15 minutes at the start of maybe a 50-minute lesson, having to get their kids logged onto their computers and impacting the learning time that they have. So it's a really difficult trade-off. It has to be in place. I've seen directly the result of what can happen when those controls aren't put in place. But likewise, we don't want to impact the learning environment to such a degree that it's causing such disruption that people aren't using the tools that are being provided to them. So we need to implement these security measures in a way that people understand their importance, providing the why as to why this is important and the impact that it has if we don't do this.
Well, that really leads me on to my next question, actually, one that I was asked outright on the NAHT podcast is it as bad and landscape, and is it as big a threat as what people are making out, that, cybersecurity and education? Is it, in your opinion, risky for schools at the moment not to do these things? And, what's the impact that you've seen if they don't?
Yes, is the easy answer to that. So the risk that not having these measures in place presents. No, let's think about this in a different way. So we're not always looking at the silver bullet for remediating these risks. We'll fix one risk, another risk pops up in its place. We need to be looking at the way that we can layer the protections, and putting things such as multi-factor authentication, staff training, policy in place are tools that we use to reduce that risk. But not only reduce the risk, it reduces the impact and the speed that someone can take our data, that can compromise our networks, that can access information about our children, our staff, our wider community as a result. So the risk of something such as poor password management, not just multi-factor authentication, but just poor password management and policy, is significant, because we often come up against schools. It's like, okay, well, we need to have a password policy that allows our younger students to be able to log in a timely manner. It's like, okay, yeah, but so the way they do that is they make the policy quite weak. The problem with that is that alongside that, we're often finding that schools aren't particularly great when it comes to appropriate levels of file permissions, so access to other drives. So I'm specifically thinking about what I've seen so many times when I've reviewed some of our pen test reports, is the speed that our penetration testing team can compromise command and control a network. This is based on an assumed compromise of a device already in the network. Compromising a student level account to getting command and control of that network is rapid.
Yeah.
If we can put measures in place such as password policy, multi-factor authentication, other tools that are available to slow that down, then that's what we're after at this stage. So I think we identify that the risk is there. Someone may be able to compromise our network, and this is the result. But the solution to that is not ignoring the controls that we can put in place to reduce that risk, because it's too hard.
Yeah.
We need to take a pragmatic approach in how we look at that. And the bit of advice that I tend to give most people, specifically around multi-factor authentication, is look at your most influential and I guess risky, if they were to be compromised, accounts first. So we're looking at school business leaders, head teachers, anyone that if their account was compromised could accelerate, lead to whatever else, a greater impact by a criminal, essentially. So start at those levels: finance staff, office staff. Implement strong password policies and multi-factor authentication on those accounts initially, and then roll it out from there, because you've got two sides to this now. So one, you've broken down that barrier of this is going to impact the operations or the education within my school. It's not doable. So you've broken that down. You've got people using it, especially if the head teacher in that school
It's lead.
to do it. Lead by example, lead from the top. And people will get on board. People will understand the importance. And I think, luckily, how people operate outside of the workplace is helping that as well. Social media accounts, banking. There's so many tools that we have that require multi-factor authentication or strong password policies. Then people are getting more on board with it. But it's when it comes up to that question of like, okay, that's great, but this is going to impact on teaching and learning in my classroom, that we then need to take another thought. And on from that, it's like, okay, if that's the stance that the school has taken, then they need to be aware of the risk that presents. The senior leadership team need to be aware of the risk that presents, and the governing body needs to be aware of the risk that presents as well.
Yeah, and I think some great points there. Um, and I think as well, well-designed systems with security implemented by design start to lessen the impact straight off. You know, if you've got conditional access, if you've got devices that are constantly monitored, if you've got all those checks and balances in place, security becomes built into it. And it's when you're doing something different to what you normally might do that you obviously then get maybe the impact and the question on why you're doing that, which is well needed. But I think you raise an interesting point around students here, and this is something that I've always questioned. For me, I'm interested to hear your viewpoint on this. A user is a user. Obviously, different users have different access to different things, but ultimately, a user is a user. And as you say, it's been very easy to get logged in as a student and get into things that you shouldn't be able to. Again, it goes back to that whole conversation about not having that deep level of expertise in schools. You're dealing with a lot of legacy setup. It's very rare that you move into a role and you can start afresh and rebuild everything from there. So there's always going to be those risks inherently in the systems that we're managing. But students are just another user on the network as a staff user. And without those password management tools in place and MFA, then we are walking down a dangerous road, I feel. And also we're not preparing them and teaching them the importance of cybersecurity and knowing that they have a role to play in securing their accounts. But you then have to measure up against the impact in the classroom. From your experience, what's the way forward in that kind of area of securing students? Is it MFA for students? Is it conditional access? Is it other tools that are out there that perhaps we don't know about, in making sure that they're secure with all those additional technology? Or is it as simple as putting in making sure they've got a strong password policy?
Yeah, going back to what I was saying before, I don't think any of these things stand alone as something that's going to resolve this problem. Putting them all together, or a combination of them together, drastically improves the security for that school. Working through each step, each layer of security that can be put in place, and understanding what risks that's solving is equally as important there. So we can look at something from, we look at staff training, so staff having a good understanding of why a password is important. We should be doing things like digital literacy for students, in terms of them understanding why good password quality hygiene is important. I think the use of devices for students isn't really helping, like personal devices is like happening. Not helping with this, because I've got my phone next to me. I just have to pick it up and look at it, and it unlocks. That's where I feel that somehow we need to be working towards. Now, this could be through one-to-one device schemes, which brings security risks in other areas, can be beneficial. But certainly staff and student awareness is of critical importance. Having robust password policies in place as well, well tested. That's where penetration testing comes in really nicely, because that will highlight any issues in what is presumed to be a robust password policy, especially with the amount of compute power that's available to be able to crack some of these passwords as well. And good data hygiene, looking at our data protection, looking at security over convenience as well, ensuring that when somebody moves job roles, that it gets changed, ensuring that when a student moves from one class to another, that their team's permissions are appropriately changed. So it's these low-level things that will benefit.
And as you say, make things a bit harder, which is all that we can really try to do. There's some big barriers we can put away, but ultimately, there is no single cure to cybersecurity. There isn't one thing that we could turn around now and say, do this and you'll never have a cybersecurity incident ever, which I think is something that it needs to be communicated clearly. And also you mentioned about students and staff, but I think there's a huge role for parents to play in this as well. We're both parents, and if they don't see that being modelled, and passwords are shared or easily guessable, normally they're the kids' names. That's not setting the example that we want with students using technology more than ever. We want them to understand what they're doing and the importance of keeping themselves secure on their social media or the platforms that they're using.
Totally. And there's one thing that's sort of screaming out in my head with this, and it comes back to culture and communication. So, okay, I think going through this, we're understanding that we, as a school, we're likely to be breached. There will be a cybersecurity incident, both within the school and at home. I'd like there to be an environment within that culture to say, I think I might have screwed up here. I want my staff to be able to come to me. So this is me as director of IT from any of my schools. I want any of those people within those schools to come to me and say, I've done this, I've clicked this, I've spoken to someone on the phone, I've scanned this QR code, I've entered some details, I've changed my password, I've done all that, but I still think that I've done something that could have caused a problem here. Because if we've got a culture where people are comfortable in speaking up, that's another thing that will reduce the impact, reduce the spread of, say, a ransomware attack or somebody that's actively compromising your network, because us as IT leaders are then able to put measures in place, and it also heightens our awareness and other people's awareness around us. And I think that you're quite right when it comes to home as well. I'd want either of my children to be able to come to me and goes, I've received this really funny looking email. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but I've done this. It's like, okay, that's probably not right. Let's just go through this again and sort that out. But
Sorry to interrupt the podcast, and we'll jump back in shortly, but I want to introduce the sponsors who make Edtech People possible. All are recognisable brands to anyone working in EdTech. Smoothall need no introduction to those working in schools, with 1 in 3 in the UK using their internet filtering, which provides real-time filtering wherever the user is and on any device. They also provide Smoothall Monitor, which is an essential safeguarding solution which allows monitoring of devices and captures for schools. You can find out more about Smoothall Filter and Smoothall Monitor and the other advice and support they've got available at smoothall.com. Next up, Secure Schools are an education-only cybersecurity team working to help schools understand the security within their schools and, crucially, provide support and training for those working within the school or trust. Recently, they have released their free Cyber School tool, allowing schools to assess their cybersecurity easily by answering key questions and getting a dashboard with all their results. Find out more by visiting their website at secureschools.com. First Pillar provide extensive support to schools in a wide range of areas. Their founder, Emma Gray, is an experienced school business leader who now works to support schools in all their operational needs, leaving them to focus on educating. You can see all the services that Emma offers at First Pillar and some great blog posts by visiting her website at firstpillar.co.uk.
Hello listeners of Edtech People, I'm Craig. When I worked in a school, I noticed how challenging it was for teachers to find and reserve shared spaces. That's why I created Classroom Bookings, an easy-to-use online room booking system. With Classroom Bookings, staff can reserve rooms at any time from anywhere. Designed for schools of all sizes, it supports multi-week timetables and flexible period times. Plus, the cloud service is priced at just £149 per year with no limit on the number of rooms or users. Try it free today or find out more at classroombookings.com.
Absolutely. I think another great point there, Tim, is that creating that culture where they can, just reach out and say, I think I might have messed up here. And, obviously everybody's accountable for their actions, but the amount of people who deliberately cause a cybersecurity incident, it's not a malicious act normally. Sometimes it's a negligent act for sure, but it's not a malicious act. And the faster the people who need to know, the more that they can do to mitigate the effects of it. And those effects are big, aren't they? We see it on the news and on the BBC. We see the impacts for schools. And one of the things I was raising on the NAHT podcast again was around the wider social impact of it nowadays as well, and how much you can throw a school backwards. Because if I was a parent of a kid at a school that had an attack, and I saw that they'd had a cyber attack, I'd question about using another system that they provide, whether that's for money on or for them even having my details in their MIS. Now, obviously, working in the industry, I know that the school won't have access necessarily to my payment details. It might be in a separate system, but I do know how much details the school have got about me and everybody else on there. And I was given the example of on your MIS, if you've got a 600 kid school, you've got 600 kids plus 3 contacts for each of those kids potentially, plus all the teaching staff, plus that's just the current staff. You have to keep that data for years upon years upon years, keep it in your systems. Huge amounts of data there that are potentially at risk, isn't there? And we that people don't even think about. And if you go back to what you're saying about simple access into file share, there's no doubt in one of those file shares you're going to find all the SEND reviews for a bunch of kids, safeguarding reports, all that kind of different data. So it's huge, isn't it? That risk given the environments. And I suppose that's another going back to earlier on in the conversation. What's the difference between business and education is that the amount of information in education is perhaps a lot more than what you'd find in a similar sized organisation elsewhere.
Absolute goldmine. It's the ability to aggregate that data over an amount of time as well is something to be considered, because I think people look at a cybersecurity incident or breach, ransomware attack. It's gone through my network. It's stopped me being able to access. We can't now run as a school. School has to close. But actually, if I've allowed someone into my network that is just sitting there, just capturing my data, that's compromised systems that I haven't been aware of because it hasn't been communicated to me, or we haven't picked it up through logs, or whatever other means. But you said the amount of data that's available, and you say through an MIS platform. I know if I take my children and at their school, so both of them will have myself and my partner attached as a contact to them. I know that we've got at least 2 grandparents attached to them as well. Each one of those contacts has an address, has a mobile phone number, has an email account that's attached to them.
All correct, all up to date normally,
Yeah. And in a school of, say, like 2,000 kids, I don't need to, as an attacker, as a criminal, aggregating and using that data, I don't need to get lucky that much to utilize that to set up bank accounts, to set up identification, to do what I need to do. So that's why, not just this, I always link and liken or raise the relevance and importance of cybersecurity by aligning it with safeguarding. Cybersecurity incidents can so quickly lead to a safeguarding incident. So the immediate loss of data, the immediate loss of, I know some schools will still use single central records within spreadsheets. Some will use like cloud platforms, but you still, as a school, might not have access to them. To our office staff being able to access medical information about a student, to our school staff receiving a phone call from someone saying that they are a contact of a student and they need to access that student urgently, and I'll be in half an hour to pick them up. There are things that not having access to this wealth of data within our schools can rapidly and seriously lead to these safeguarding incidents. And safeguarding is the thing that trumps anything within
Yeah.
our schools.
Yeah.
It's always at the forefront.
And the IT tools give context to it a lot, don't they? You know, they for example know in my kids' place, for example, that they know that they don't live with me all the time. They live with their mum, and this and this specific case, it might be, you know, they've got an SEND condition. It's context there as well for the school, and if they're hit with one of those cybersecurity incidents, not only is that information in the wrong hands, but they won't have access to it. And I think getting across the message of the impact, and it's a leadership responsibility at the end of the day. It is not all on the IT team. They play a significant, important role in it, but the awareness has to be there throughout the organisation. Everybody needs to know their responsibilities and the role with that, from a teacher through to senior leadership, from your site staff to your finance staff. It can't be overstated that the importance of their role and their responsibilities within that. And these things are, it's a fine balance, as we say, but it is the difference between being negligent and being malicious. And you know, you can't be negligent when it comes to safeguarding. You can't be negligent when it comes to cybersecurity, because, as they say, one can quickly lead to another, but the impacts there are you know, just as immense, and yeah, very, very, very scary. So I guess, you know, now we've scared everybody a little, and there is obviously a lot of backlash of saying, "Oh, I've actually sat in meetings with leadership teams when they said, I know you're going to talk to me about cybersecurity. I've sat for it before. You know, like I'm not worried about it. You know, it's a big scare game, and it's a sales tactic." And I'm like, this isn't a scare tactic. You know, you just go search on the BBC, see the impact on schools. I mean, it was the whole of the Isle of Wight that was taken out fairly recently, and there's things on there almost weekly. What is the next step for taking this seriously? Obviously, you've got your tools within secure schools, but and the ideal world, you know, and I know this is something that I'm working through with Concera as a partner. You know, sure as many people as possible get this as part of what we're doing. But how do we get that message across, and how do we, I don't want to use the term legislate, but how do we enforce protection? Because the DfE are obviously currently talking about putting the digital standards around cybersecurity. I believe that's one of the 6 that they're talking about being mandatory. But is that the answer? What do we need to do to get the importance of this across and for people to take action?
I really like the noises that the DfE are making in respect of I guess invoking this action. In mine and I know our experience throughout their advice and guidance, they like to use the word should rather than must, and the language that's being used at that level, that top level, is certainly aligning with schools must be doing these things, which I think is super helpful because it's raising the profile of cybersecurity specifically, but IT and its or our school's dependency on digital resources. But the culture within our schools, within our communities, is something that I'll go back to as well. One of the things that I consistently and still do consistently come across is that I've been involved with schools and in this role I've spoken to schools where they feel that cybersecurity or information security as a whole is an IT problem, and that's the point where they sort of, I guess, hand it off, or um, they're comfortable with that risk decision, because it's like, okay, as a school leader, this is an IT thing, and to draw out exactly what you mentioned before is that this is a whole school thing. This is a whole community thing. This is getting staff on board. This is getting our kids on board. This is getting parents on board. But just as importantly, getting our school leadership teams on board with understanding why this is such a priority. And you sort of used the word scare a few moments ago, but that's not the intention. That's the reality.
Yeah.
And people need to understand that. You know, I'm not sitting here as a salesperson. You're not sitting there as a salesperson for our companies. We're sitting here as individuals that are passionate about education.
And this is scary.
Yeah, this is the reality. And I think, you know, we've both been through the evolution of safeguarding within the school system. I've worked in schools for over 20 years before joining Secure Schools, and I know back in the earlier days, it was normally either didn't exist as a thing, or it would be something like, oh, that's something that we refer to the Senko. That's something that they do, and that's not right. And we're now in a much better situation where people understand that safeguarding is an everyone problem. It's something that we all need to see as a priority, and something that we all need to be aware and get and be involved with when there's a concern. And that's exactly what we need to do with cybersecurity as well. It's not just the IT managers or the service providers problem. This is an everyone problem within our school and within the community. And this is where something like our cyber incident response planning can come in really nicely, because it allows schools to risk assess where they are, and get the right people involved in that. Often liken it, and the rest of the team often liken it to fire safety within schools. Well, doing a fire drill, or if there is an active fire situation, that's not just the responsibility of the site team, the custodian, the caretaker, whatever the school wants to refer to them as. It's not their responsibility to resolve that situation. And the same with cybersecurity. If there is an incident, it is not just the IT team or the MSP, although there might be service level agreements in place where they will respond to it. But it's not going to be the IT technician or the service provider who is speaking to the local media. It's not going to be the IT technician or the service provider that's making the decision to close the school should it ever get to that situation. They are part of the resolution to the situation, but the same as the business manager, the head teacher, the chair of governors has a role to play in this. And in creating of those plans, we need to make sure that those people are aware of their roles as well.
Absolutely. Because one of the big things, obviously, is when it happens, and I do think in a lot of schools it's a case of if, not when. The impact then is huge, and people won't know their individual roles in it unless you've put that out and you've planned for that event. And it's interesting you link it back to fire safety, because again, in the podcast I did the other day, I was talking about from my point of view, when I have to justify to schools why they're investing in something that they might not see every day.
Yeah.
So They won't necessarily see the difference between the A3 and the A5 licenses day in, day out. They won't see the difference between, the security being in place and not being in place day in, day out. If anything, as we said earlier on, they might just see the negative side of it. But you don't, when you've got a school, you don't forgo the fire extinguishers, you don't forgo the sprinklers, because you might not have a fire.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't go without these technical solutions because you might not have a cyber attack. Because if you do, you're going to need those sprinklers and you're going to need those fire extinguishers, if there's a fire event. And it's also comparing that kind of thing on how the technologies move forward as well, because you'll have lots of older buildings in education that won't be able to support sprinklers, won't be able to support effective fire management, doors and everything like that. But the government's had to invest in, and schools have had to invest in going back and making them up to code and making sure that they've got those things in them. We need that same kind of input now on the technological front.
Yeah.
We need schools that have got these old systems to be turned around and told you can't do that. And one of the things that really scares me at the moment, so we're recording this in April 2025, is that Windows 10 is coming end of life in October 2025 this year. And the amount of schools that I'm meeting with, and they're saying, yeah, we're going to keep on using it because it won't start working on that date. And it should be. And to be fair, it is said, but it's not enforced. You can't use this past this date. And it should be, crystal clear to schools. It's not an option. And I hear about schools saying, oh, well, yeah, but we'll buy into the extended security updates, the ESUs. And I'm like, that doesn't mean that the software running on Windows is going to be still supported and safe either. You must move to these technologies that are protecting you and keeping you up to date and looking after them. So yeah, I think it's some certainly you and I sound like we're on exactly the same pathway with it and understanding that impact and that effect on there from there. So the going back to the plans, the incident planning. Obviously, you mentioned earlier on about backups, and there are still schools without effective backups. There's still schools who don't know where their data is, and a lot of people confuse GDPR with cybersecurity. Now there is a big link, between the data that you've got and keeping it security, but they're just still handing off that GDPR and that cybersecurity thing to somebody with no prior experience in the field and expecting them to do the huge tasks involved, aren't they? One of the things I talked about at school the other day was, and it goes the same for cybersecurity. If the data's not there on your systems, then it can't be used against you, and that's true. Cybersecurity event. If you've got no servers with no data on it, they can't hack your servers. If you've deleted the data because it falls out of scope of GDPR compliance, so it's not relevant, you're not using it, there's no need to keep it, then again, that can't be used in a subject access request. Same, it can't be used in a cyber attack because the data is not there. So that is a time-consuming job, and we know that schools don't have those resources to it. So it's falling to companies and individuals like yourselves at Secure Schools to do that and put that in there. So in terms of growth and of you guys, in terms of the work that you're doing, have you seen a big pickup in the amount of schools that are finally engaging with that over the last 2 to 3 years, or is it still something that you're struggling to get across at some schools?
Yeah, certainly the latter, but thankfully the former as well. Going to these big education trade shows, it's a really good barometer to where the market is with their understanding of this, and we're not just talking about the people, the personas that you would expect to come and speaking to us about this and understanding it. We'd often get that with IT staff speaking to us. They would get the path they're on, but be frustrated that their schools that they were working for weren't as understanding as they hoped they would be. We've now got school leaders, head teachers, deputy head teachers, CEOs of trusts directly speaking to us because they understand the importance. They're coming to us, and I'd say 2-3 years ago, it's like, we'd like to get a penetration test, and it's like, okay, tell me more. That's certainly something that we can help you with. And you would quickly understand that they didn't understand what they were actually asking for. And a lot of these it would transpire that they would have a member of their governing body that has suggested this as something that's useful because it's fairly well and understood within private sector. But now when we're speaking to schools, they truly seem to be understanding what they need, and us as secure schools will assist them along that path, and we'll look at whether something like an audit is most appropriate.
Yeah, it's interesting actually because one of the I hope I wasn't wrong. You might well tell me now that I am. But in this thing the other day, they said to me, "What do you think is the most important thing to do?" And I said, "Get the basics in place, get MFA in place. That's the one thing you can go away and do that." But they were saying, "What do you think that schools focus on too much that they don't need?" And my answer was actually penetration testing. It's not that I don't think it's needed. I think it's a little bit down the line from where a lot of schools currently are, and it all obviously depends on what type of penetration testing. But if your penetration testing is trying to get through a firewall and that school is on a hosted firewall from an education ISP, what you're doing there is you're not actually testing anything at the school level. You're testing what they're buying into, and therefore there's other things that they can focus on first. Would you agree with that, or am I talking about the
I,
backside?
I do. I don't totally agree with what you've said there, although you're not entirely wrong with it. So if we look at what secure schools can offer in terms of our platform, if we're looking at those sort of basic level things that schools can do, secure schools have got the foundations free forever part of our platform. So that allows schools to sign up and um, and get access to our platform. But not only that, it gives them access to our community site as well. So going back to that culture, that community, being able to ask those questions in an open environment. But what we'll have with foundations is our cyberscore product. So that will allow schools to benchmark where they are in their cybersecurity posture. So the whole intention from my part behind foundations is that it is a platform, a tool that anyone within that school can go into, that they can look at the statements and they can understand what those statements are. And each one of those statements, once completed, is something that's going to improve the cybersecurity within those schools. So it's part of those. I mean, it's not just the basics. There's some quite in-depth thing in there because we'll talk about passwords and MFA, but it's getting those things right alongside schools being able to purchase our phishing sim platform, training, policy development. So they're like the grounding elements, especially we mentioned before about policy being one of those sort of fundamental elements to schools. The point of putting these things in place and why I disagree with penetration testing, I guess it's getting to a similar point in having its place, is that I think schools are very eager to have penetration testing, but not necessarily for the right reasons. What I'd like to see is, as you mentioned as well, is the schools getting those fundamentals, those other layers of cybersecurity in place before going into penetration testing. The reason that I somewhat disagree with that statement is that the pen testing can also be used as an assurance piece to schools as well. So we mentioned earlier some of the, I guess, the politics that we might have between the IT staff in schools and maybe the school finance and business leaders. It's expensive, and what we can use pen testing for is proving a point, I guess,
Mm.
is what I'm trying to say. Is like, look, I need, as an IT leader within this school, if you want these risks to be reduced to a level that is appropriate and within our risk appetite, I need resource to be able to fix that, to be able
Yeah.
to improve that or reduce that to a level that is acceptable, and to go through that cybersecurity journey through our platform, through to auditing, through to vulnerability scanning and penetration testing. That's all part of that journey. The thing is, with pen testing, it tends to be quite expensive, but it incorporates other elements as well. So it's sometimes financially a difficult one to approach, but likewise, you're quite right in saying actually get some of these things in place, get your pen testing done. The, the ironic thing that then might generate, it haven't had one to date yet, is like a no fault found pen test. That's the ideal. But then you present that to your business manager, your chair of governors, who don't quite have that understanding as to what they've just spent X amount of pounds on, to go, well, what have we actually paid for here? And it's like, this is exactly what you've paid for here, the assurance
Yeah.
of the security measures that we're putting in place.
I have similar conversations trying to sell Wi-Fi surveys. It could be that your Wi-Fi is brilliant, but it could not be. So, it's that on there. So, just before I finish off with the usual questions that we ask you, just for listeners of the podcast to be aware, that I'm going to try and do a new format for Edtech People for shorter episodes with a couple of friends of mine who also work at Consero, to our operations chief operations officer and our marketing colleague, and basically this is based on plenty of conversations we have in the office where I'm trying to put across the technical side of things, then we have to translate that into how we can sell it and how we can put it into operations, and basically we have a good laugh and they ask some really, really good questions and put some really good views across it. So we're doing some shorter question and answer style sessions. So the first one's going to be on cybersecurity. So if anybody has any questions that have come up from today and they want us to answer them on their behalf, you can leave a comment on this episode if you're using Spotify. If not, you can reach out to me on social media. You can drop an email to us. All the details are on the website edtechpeople.co.uk. And if you want to find out more around Secure Schools, they're obviously a sponsor of this podcast as well, which I'm very, very grateful for. And you can find some more information about everything that they do on their website, secureschools.com. And you can reach out to their guys there. They're honestly, working with them over the last few months has been a real joy of working with people who actually get the industry that we're in and what we're trying to achieve, and are not doing it from a business point of view, but doing it from an education point of view because they know how much that matters, and it's great to align those kind of things. So it's been great having you on here, Tim, and I really appreciate the really good information that you've provided and viewpoints. So we'll just end with this question really about I'm guess this is going back to when you worked in schools a little bit, so it doesn't have to be cybersecurity related at all. But one thing that you would never like to see in a classroom ever again, and one thing that you're really excited to see about in the future. So we'll start with the thing that you'd never like to see in the classroom again if you had your way and you could just ban it outright.
It is going to be cybersecurity linked in my current role, but it was ever present throughout the various schools that I've worked in previously. Group logins to devices.
Yes.
It's very, very much one thing that I do not want to see in people's classrooms again. Not just from the cybersecurity, but through just general logging, being able to see who's done what, where, and when.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And one of the things I often get asked is around the safeguarding bit of it, the monitoring and filtering, and being able to identify people. And without this being a sales pitch, one to the parent company for Secure Schools also have my login, which makes it a lot easier for younger kids to log in with a QR code or a more simplistic password, but it's in a controlled environment, which doesn't leave them susceptible as easily as others, as having a single login others to an attack as well. So I'm putting that in there. I know you're not pushing that one, but I think it's worth mentioning. And what thing are you really excited about for the future?
I'm excited to see the impact of more robust systems going into our classrooms. We've got the DFE initiatives like Connect the Classroom, better understanding of the importance of the robustness of those systems as well, not only from a cybersecurity perspective, but just from a teaching and learning perspective.
Yeah. What a great answer, and you can tell that you've obviously worked in IT for a long time, because I put a similar post out on LinkedIn recently. It's actually, I know cybersecurity is important. I know we're talking about it a lot, but there are other benefits from having a secure network and invested in your these systems on it, your your connectivity and everything else that you're doing on there, and the devices that people are using. That you need to invest in that for lots of other reasons than just cybersecurity. So it's really good to hear that. Tim, thank you so much for your time today. And your input on the podcast. I really appreciate it. People can find you on LinkedIn, can't they, if they want to strike up a conversation with yourself, have a chat there. But thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me involved. Thank you.